Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel, and that is the R in the RK Stumbling Bear, and I'm a reader and a writer. And I am back to do my November and December reading wrap-up. The first thing I finished in November was Alien Dissonance by Wendell Borman, and this is one of the books that I am reading for the self-published science fiction contest. And it is about a group of aliens who have come to Earth for refuge, had to separate, and now they're coming back together. It's very much like a Avengers come back together moment and then go fight the evil bad. For me, this was a very rompy story, and I was okay with it. One of the reasons I was super interested in, because it was supposed to be set around where I live. Well, sort of. It definitely mentioned Belmont, Kansas, which is like 4 hours south of where I am. But then reading it, it had some references to Kansas City, which is an hour away from me. So it was kind of fun to be like, okay, how was the author doing this and setting this up in my area? After reading Alien Dissonance, I then got sick. And it was the type of sick where it took me out for a couple weeks. And it took my brain out. You know, sometimes you'll get sick and you can still read, and then sometimes you get sick and you can't. And I got sick and couldn't. So it took me a couple weeks to actually start to feel better. And then when I felt like my mind could kind of latch onto something, I picked up Grave Cold by Shannon Knight and wasn't able to focus. So then I switched to manga and I started binging manga. And because I was doing this on the computer, I wasn't really keeping a whole bunch of track of what I was reading. I know I binged Boys Over Flowers. It's my first time reading this. I would say this is like the ultimate bully romance story where the main character is originally bullied by the guy she gets with. And I could see growth in the guy, but no growth in the girl. Like she felt like she stayed the same, very wishy-washy, and I'm like, oh, whatever. I've read it now. Everybody's talked about it. It's done. But I can see how other bully romance stories have come about because of this, and not in a good way. Then at the very end of November, my brain was starting to latch onto more things, but still don't want to focus on anything new. So I indulged myself and went for a reread of The Fairy Godmother by Mercedes Lackey. And this is a play on fairy tales, and it's just in a world in the 100 Kingdoms, or 500 kingdoms, sorry. These kingdoms, there's a magic called the tradition that creates fairy tales. And then sometimes, even though there's the power in the tradition there, the fairy tales can't always happen. So the main character, I would think, Elena, is basically part of a Cinderella tale, except the prince is 8 years old, so that's not going to work. She gets a chance to escape from her wicked evil stepmother, and she takes it. And she gets picked up by a fairy godmother and offered to train. And so this is kind of that journey of what do fairy godmothers do, and how are they important in this type of society, directing the tradition. Because Elena and her trainer Bella, they very much don't want the tragic fairy tales to happen. Like they have a type of stories like Ladder Locks, which is like Rapunzel. All these princes die in the original story before one gets through, and they don't want that happening. So this was a fun reread. And then I decided to pick up some historical romance just to see how my brain would react. And yeah, it started to latch on further. So I read Someone to Love, Someone to Wed and Someone to Care by Mary Balogh, I think it's how you say it. And as historical romances go, these aren't super impressive, very much focused on the romance with a little bit of the trappings of historical. Having read 3 of them, I found that her characters were kind of repetitive. All of her characters describe each other the same way and have the same experience with one another. It was cute. I definitely did not read these, read in order. I just read the characters I was interested in. I think my favorite so far was Someone to Care, and that's Viola, who is the ex-countess. The premise of this story is the Lord Count, he dies, and then it's discovered that the Countess and the 3 kids that he had with her are not his legitimate family. He practiced bigamy. He was still married to somebody else, and he had a daughter with her. And so she gets to inherit everything, but she's been living in an orphanage. Then it's the Westcotts embrace her, but still, are embracing Viola and her kids because that's the family they've always known, and they love them. Someone to Care is Viola finding her love and getting to be herself. And I really enjoyed it when she ran away with the Marquess, even though she doesn't know he's a Marquess. I then finished The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I would very much say that this compares with his City of Stairs in that the setting of the world is very much a character in its own right. And I love how atmospheric Robert Jackson Bennett can write. In this one, in The Tainted Cup, you're following Den, who is the apprentice of Anna Doloraba, who's like a Sherlock character, except Anna doesn't leave her office to investigate. Den goes, sees everything, comes back and tells her, and then she connects things. And then you also get to see where Din is starting to connect things and has different experiences with people. I think if you read a lot of mysteries, you're going to figure out how this mystery is going down pretty quick. But again, it goes back to the environment plays a big factor in how everything's going, and that is something that I loved. I ended up really enjoying The Tainted Cup. And then I finally went back to Grave Cold by Shannon Knight. Like I said, I tried reading it in November and my brain was like, no. This time worked perfectly fine. Really enjoyed this. I'm forgetting the heroine's name, but the main guy is Niall or Niall Wolf, and he is what they call a raven. And that is someone who goes and releases the dead. And he has felt the summonings to the District of Portland. This is set in a futures dystopian-ish time where big cities have kind of become city-states again. And so he goes there and they won't let him in. There's a wall, and there's something weird about the wall. He can sense dead people are trapped in the wall, and he's not sure why. I keep wanting to say the main character goes by Kat. I know, if I remember right, it's Kat. Her name is Caitlin, and because her grandmother's Grandma Kat, and she was named after her. So, the little things you remember. She is a necromancer, but she doesn't know it at this point of time. And she's not sleeping very well. She's also a hairstylist, so you get to see her doing that. With this dystopian future, there are people who are genetically modified, and so she's been marked as someone who is genetically altered or modified, even though she actually hasn't been. The necromancers are more natural, but because of her color identification, there's discrimination. Because she's having trouble sleeping, she actually leaves Portland to go to the woods to take a nap. And that's where her and Niall meets. He convinces her to sneak him into Portland, and once they're there, she ends up helping him release the dead. And this was a very fun story. I really enjoyed it. This is definitely one I would call paranormal science fiction, and I never thought I would find a book like that. But you definitely have the paranormal aspects with the dead and laying down of the dead and necromancers, but you very much have technology in this as well. Not only is it because it's set in a future time, but how it's not a spoiler, it's said in the synopsis, the District of Portland is using the dead to power their energy. So, like I said, it is a paranormal science fiction. You do have that blend. And because it's set in Portland and it references different things, I'm wondering if my friend Margaret, who lives over there, if she read it, if she would recognize places. I think that'd be kind of cool to know. I then read The Drowning Earth by Sean Wilson, another science fiction contest book. And this is one that caught my attention because on the cover, the submarine is turning. It's turning, but it's curved shape. And I was like, all right, what's the technology going on here? So this is kind of like a sci-fi thriller is how I would best explain it. It's the first in a series called the Portalverse. You first meet some gods that kind of have like Greek names, and at first that kind of threw me off. I'm like, wait, we're having gods in this? But they're also referenced as builders, and you can be like, oh, okay. You can kind of see how that ties into science fiction. And then we get into the story where we're following Cal Williams, who her and her friend have created this articulating spines feature for submarines. The UK government has, basically bought it from them under threat of eminent domain, I think is what they said. But because they actually sold it, she had leverage to say, I'm going to be the captain of its maiden voyage. So here we are. And then there are espionage issues. And yeah, it goes from there. Like, it is a lot of fun and interesting to see kind of how they've changed the submarine technology. I then read Comey Can't Communicate, Volume 22, and I realized somewhere on my spreadsheet I never recorded that I had read 21. I remembered it. This is where they've gone to New York for a student vacation, and so I've just, on my spreadsheet, I've marked them both that I've read both of them in December, and I think on Goodreads because it wasn't marked there. But really, I read 21 earlier. Maybe I read it during my brain fog in November and missed it. But continuing to love this story, so cute. I love the relationships. I then finished an audiobook, Eve, and how the female body drove 200 million years of human evolution by Kat Bohannon, and I have been listening to this on audiobook for months now. I'm very slow. Typically I listen to this like when I'm going back and forth to Kansas City, and this is going through different Eves that we have had and how different evolutionary things have made it possible to where we are now, and how even now we're going to have to change because what we've done in the past is not always going to help us here in the future. I really found this informative. Bohannon really took the time to research and bring that research to the forefront, and there's things that I didn't know that I learned, which was cool. And her sense of humor also worked for me. It also helped that she was the one reading the audiobook, so she knew where to inflect. But yeah, I would say that if you're curious about evolution and how the female body and even how society could have gotten to how we are today, this is a really good book. And then the last book in December that I finished was Somewhere Beyond the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, where we are following more Arthur Parnassus's point of view. And I think this story is really about healing for Arthur. The thing about grief and trauma is it's not healed and done and you move on. It cycles back and forth, and we get to see Arthur as new events are happening. Like, it's bringing up things and he's having to deal with it new again. But he's now not alone. This book does take place after The House in the Cerulean Sea, so he has his partner Linus, and he has his kids, and he has his best friend Zoe. And it was a very heartwarming story. When Arthur was on and the kids, it was perfect. There are places that can feel a little preachy, and the ending of the story felt very like Deus Ex Machina for me. It's like all of a sudden here. But then again, the author also pulled this, oh hey, this character told this character something, and it's not revealed to the reader, but it affects how the last scenes go, the ultimate conclusion. And as a reader, that's not one of my favorite devices. If you've been giving us all the information beforehand, give us the information now at the same time as the character we're following gets it. Or I kind of feel cheated when the character references they have information that the reader doesn't. But yes, I am interested in seeing where another book goes, and by how this ends, I'm pretty sure there will be another book. I am currently reading The Will of the Many. There's no way I'm going to finish this before the end of December, so this will be probably the first book I will finish in January. And it's a nice chunk of a book, so it's going to take me a while. If you have read any of these books, I would love to know what you thought. And if you're interested in reading any of these books, please let me know down below. And because it's winter, if you have watched this and you don't want to comment, leave me an emoji, something winter themed, because I'd love to know that you were here. Thank you, and have a great day.